So, Nondwe Mpuma is a fantastic poet and human and host here at the Red Wheelbarrow. She published her debut collection through Schlanger Press earlier this year in about April, I think it was. It's called Peach Country, and it's got stunning cover artwork. If you haven't seen it or don't own a copy, just the artwork alone is enough to be a reason to buy it, never mind the fantastic poems within it. She's a lecturer and PhD candidate at UWC, and she's an awesome human being, and I'm very excited to hear her read some more poems for us tonight. So I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for that. I love the poem that you just read, and I guess I'll just start reading. But I think the poem that you just read made me want to read childhood. I wasn't planning to read it, but then now, since you read that, I was like, how appropriate that I start this with childhood. So childhood. It was not too long ago that coming home during the bold and the beautiful caught us a hiding. We never returned home on time when fetching water. The bursts of water-filled condoms tied our legs to the tap. Our return from herding the goats led us to the big tree on the hill, where we picked and plaited grass skipping ropes, and we jumped to the months of the year, Onozizwe, Oshikoshi, and our heads spun from rounds of Osamtumela. Sometimes the skipping rope was replaced by my grandmother's old ribbed pantyhose, where our young throats never tired from singing Utoshiwe. Other times, the skipping rope and the pantyhose were replaced by a plastic ball and an old animal dish and tin cans, and after hours at play, with shaking hands behind our backs, we tried to sneak into the kitchen where we had left mountains of breakfast dishes, but they would have disappeared, and our grandmother would be waiting for us to throw out the dirty water, with her face twisted up in unspoken anger. We told tales about the goats running away from us that saved us from our grandmother's shouts. Most times we were not that lucky, and often bribed her by spring cleaning the home. So I planned this reading, or at least in my head when I was thinking about this reading, I was thinking about reading poems that I don't read often, because there are those poems that I have but don't tend to read. They are just those poems that I just never gravitate towards reading. So I guess for tonight I'm reading those poems. And the next poem that I'm gonna read, if you have the book, it's on page 15 and it's called Pastoral. Cows stop the cars. They cross over to the marsh like soldiers on a parade. Their hips are those of belly dancers. Pockets of dark clouds promise rain. Wild lavender waves in the wind. A bird is splayed on the pavement. Two dirty zebra-striped cats scavenge in the bins lining the wall. A heron languidly herds. The cows are Moses. They part the grass and lavender to reach the river. They drink from a river of diapers. Page 18, from God's Stool in Summer, after Anne Carson. Ocean dune, time eats you when the rain and winds come. Open boat, you are my ark when we rise and approach the shore. Your hands met mine in the middle of giving grace. Stories that lie before us in trinkets of light, clouds and tears, are thieves that steal the sun. Dog, he howls at us. Tornadoes, that's page 21. Tornadoes. One late spring in the morning of summer, a woman sees the tale of Inkanyam. An orchestra of tins, pots, pans, and drums play in the air, small prayers that the unpainted roofs are not mistaken for Iziziba. In the tail end of summer, we watch peacocks flare their feathers to their beloveds. Identifying witches, page 34. The old lady, who is the last of her generation, walks past. The pleats on her face fold all the way down to her neck. She totters as though every step needs a pause before the next. She lives in a rendezvous. She is a witch. The little girl whose clothes carry the smell of smoke, with her legs folded and held captive by her stick-like arms, sits alone. Last night's empty dinner plate has drawn in ash on her lips and drawn with ribs on her belly. She is a witch. The man who was dropped on his head by his father speaks to himself from sunrise to sunset. He picks up pieces of trash and is always, always alone. He walks barefoot with his sixth toe on show, and his hands are dry and creased. He, too, is a witch. So those of you who know me and have been at these readings when I host, I am a fan of list poems. I love list poems. I live for list poems. They're my favorite thing to do and write. And so this was a list poem, which was obviously a list poem. If that makes any sense. I love this poem. I find it like it's humorous, and I'm not someone who's typically humorous. So this poem was like an achievement. So list of things that are bad luck. Watching donkeys give birth. There are things, excuse me. List of things that are bad luck. Watching donkeys give birth. There are things that must never be seen lest we lose our sight. Sweeping at night. One can never be too careful with the approach of the witching hour, and no woman readily volunteers to be a spinster. Eating with the left hand. There is something disturbing about having similarities with monkeys and not being right. Being behind someone or giving something to someone behind their back or behind someone else's back. Backs carry many burdens, and most frightening is the burden of bad luck. Closing all the doors and windows during a storm. Lightning requires an entrance and an exit. Refusing ceremonial meat. The ancestors hold generational grudges. Mumbling angrily about a parent. They are closer to where feet turn and toes point to the sky, and once at this place, they become those who hold generational grudges. Okay, let's see. Dream. This is on page 28. I am in a burning hut with snakes, and you know how to watch quietly, and we both leave with minds intact. I am drowning in a shallow river. My arms flail around, so you know how to wait, and I love you for waiting. In this dream, I am covered by a swarm of bees like a second layer of skin. They begin to weave honey from my pores. You don't start a fire. You don't gather smoke. And here I know you love me. So if you don't have a copy of the book, or if you have a copy of the book is divided into sections, and all the sections are based on Eden, loosely, very loosely. And these, when I wrote these poems, I wrote them, I think most of them I wrote them last year, the poems that happened to kind of separate the book into these sections. I wrote them last year when I was thinking through the theme for McGregor. I can't remember what the theme was, but I thought of just writing poems about Eden. I don't exactly know why, but I wrote a lot. Yeah, Garden of Eden. So that kind of led me to writing about. I wrote a lot of. I wrote maybe about 5-6 poems on just Eden, and I went through a process where I kept refining them. I have some very long ones that I ended up never not using in the book and kind of discarding, which was kind of sad. Maybe I need to go back to those. But so I'm going to read one of the Eden poems. Typically, I like to read them in order, but I don't know why. Now I'm not reading them in order. So I'm reading the second one, which is on page 26. Loved one, follow. Eden 2. Enter in the beginning of winter, with weeds and thorns sprouting between amakate. The peach trees are dry at this time of the year. They stand like scarecrows in the middle of harvest time. Walk slowly in the peppering salt granules of frost. Feel the toes inside soft leather curdle like burnt custard. Watch your arms turn purple because when the sun shines on snow, the cold engulfs the valley. Watch your hands turn purple like fading black hair dye. Don't rush for spring and summer. This is not the Garden of Eden, forever flowered and green. It is too brown to be Eden, too affected by the temperament of clouds and sun and sky. Don't rush for spring and summer, even though our mothers' tongues tell us that these are times of plenty. Watch as peach pink blossoms sprout before the leaves and fruit. Enter in spring where life is held in blossoms, as it is in moles on skin. Till and weed, clear out all the thorns, and cover the rich red, brown, black soil. Seeds can be sown here, where coils uncoil and straighten in the rays of the sun, and grass strands begin to bear seeds that we can twist to rope to gain. In summer, a time of plenty, I spread leaves like puzzle pieces. I want to create an Eden forever green, recreate that moment between man and serpent. The breeze is disobedient, and the leaves flit away like dust. Okay. Sorry, just trying to get to the right page. A courting. This is on page 44. I want to leave you thinking about what the cat thinks as he chases the mouse or feeds on a pigeon under the table. I want you to wonder about the pregnant cloud that refuses to give birth. I want you to look at the sheep that is jealous about its breasts, even as its lamb wastes away, and be in awe. I want to lead you to the holes in the fence that the chickens keep breaching. I want you to fear the cows because they have horns that we should probably fear, and they have grudges that they should probably avenge. At nighttime, I want you to see the fullness of the moon and the dust of matter in the sky. Okay, just checking. Okay, so we're still doing good for time. Okay. Eden 2. No, Eden 3. So this is Eden 3, the beginning of the final section in the collection. And this is in page 40. Let us borrow love. Ukamata only listens from the mountain. Let us pour sunflower petals dunked in perfume down each other's necks. Ocean will approve. Invisible red strings tie us together like infinite leashes. We know too well that a broken string never regains perfection. Allow us Cupid's arrows, we will pierce each other. Let us only have life like the bristlecone pine. We have no need for knowledge, for good or evil. Borrow us time as a companion. Three ceremonies. This is page 41. With God's blessing, the happy couple walked down the aisle, comforted by their dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth. Comforted by the capacity of her womb to hold, and not by the years that she will remain barren, and all the years that he will sow his seed in other pastures over the earth. In her champagne gown and him in his charcoal tuxedo, the happy couple walked down the aisle in a church as one flesh blessed by the Trinity. 2. She is dressed by her mother and sister in an indigo three-cats dress that complements her husband's shirt. She sits on a mat, her head lowered, counting ants. Before they throw blankets over her, and her new family puts her in a thick off-white cotton gown with black trimmings on the skin and shawl. The old woman in the middle of the tent, next to her new granddaughter-in-law, holds a jug full of brew. She pours 3 drops on the ground while calling out 3 of the nearest clan names and asks them to open. In quick succession, the young woman is changed and more blankets are thrown over her, and he sits and marvels over what a blushing bride she is. She who will brew beer, brew children, brew a home, all for him. 3. He enters her father's kraal with a gift that will make mouths move and a bottle of Klipdrift export under his armpit. He gifts her father with a cow and takes his leave. There is no special dress for the day. She is in everyday clothes, in the home that she will leave for her own. Her family throws more blankets over her. They will keep her warm when he leaves. Home. I'm reading this poem because it always makes me feel warm and fuzzy, because it just has a special place in my heart and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. And so I'll read it because, yeah, it just gives me that feeling. Home. And we fetched them from the airport, and home arrived with nightly prayers and steamed pudding. And in the evenings, my mother cooked bap and vleis, and we sat around the stumpy glass table and watched Animal Farm on SABC News. And we threw stones at Napoleon. And I passed my grandfather 8 days in September. And with old eyes, he read until he had to walk out for a smoke. And night came. And he called Damnan and checked on the cows, and he checked on the sheep and the chickens and his wild horse and the church list and the goat that had disappeared for 3 days. And when the birds began to call, my grandmother began Lukrestum Kululiwetu. And our uneven voices were capable of breaking windows, and we knelt in thanks to the Almighty. And after the Lord's Prayer was sung, grandmother taught my cousin the words to Nkosi Tembewen, and after Amen, we answered the bed's calls. And I think I am going to read 2 final poems. Let's see. Maybe let's go back to the beginning. And I'll read Eden 1, which is page 12. So, Eden. We begin with plain and pleasure, let it be known. There are no hills and mountains. We won't find bones here, not Adams, not Eves. Beloved, we are too close to waters. Our totems fear the seas. Between us, lust sits in Burgundy. we are easily movable in the work of the Lord. And the final poem that I will read for tonight is at the end, and that is on page 43. At the end. Burning rocks war in the sky, mapping where you and I end. Even the road shifts and meanders around trunks and rivers for us. In this moment, we abandon fiber optics and satellites. Our mouths do what they do best. Words dissipate with time. We have made them expensive. Like air, they become thin only to reverberate throughout the cosmos. With that, thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nondwe. If everyone wants to unmute to clap for Nondwe, you can. Bravo.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Did I just do it?
All right. So, questions. I will start us off, and then anyone else who's got a question for Nondwe can raise a hand or put it in the chat or give me a shout. Yeah, I'm wondering, you've had a few months now since your book came out. Does it feel different to be a poet with a book that you can like show your work as this thing that people can buy? Has it sunk in, and does it feel different, or is it the same?
It is different. It doesn't feel different, but it is different. I didn't realize, okay, so funny story. So I went to a no, it wasn't a conference, it was a talk. It was a talk organized by UCT. So I went to this talk, and Kollega Putuma was there. And in my head, I didn't think she'd recognize me or she'd have my book. It just wasn't something, it was, yes, I have a book out, but in my head, it's almost like I don't expect people to have it or to recognize me or to compliment me on it. So that has been weird and awkward. And so having an actual book has resulted in some very awkward experiences, but funny in retrospect. So in that sense, it's different. In every other way, I think it's still the same. I don't know. I think it's still the same. It's just the having it is the difference. The having it and having it be read by other people. When I'm primarily someone who writes for myself, that sounds selfish, but I do kind of write for myself. And so having it out is weird.
Makes sense. Thank you. And that's really cool that you're getting recognized by cool people, because you're a cool person too. So there you go. All right, Jacques' hand is up, so he's up next.
So I'm curious about the bewitched people, and I loved your reading, by the way.
Thank you, Jacques.
I'm curious about the bewitched people because there's a sense in which you're not quite sure whether, well, for me, and it may be that I'm ignorant, but reading the poem, I'm not quite sure whether it's a blessing or a curse. It's sort of, are they, you know, they're special. It's as if you're looking at them from two different directions. And I almost feel the same thing about the unlucky things, that you're sort of saying, oh, well, maybe it's like this, but maybe it's like that, you know. You want to say something about that?
Yeah, so I grew up in like rural Eastern Cape, very, very rural. And so some experiences I carry, some things that come from that upbringing, I kind of take with me. They my little luggage that I carry everywhere. And so with certain poems, I write them without wanting to cast too much judgment. There are poems where I feel like I am casting judgment. And then there are poems where there is a sense that at one level I believe in these things, but there's another level that is skeptical of these things. I think when it comes to things like witchcraft, it can't be disproved and it can't be proved, at least in my perspective. So
Yes.
when I approach something like witchcraft, I'm like, I don't want to say it's not true, but I also don't want to affirm it. I don't want to affirm the consequences that come from, naming someone or pointing at someone and saying that someone is a witch. But what if they are? Then what happens then? So I think with that poem, I was trying to more like write it as factual as I could without asserting any opinion either way. And with the list of things that are bad luck, some of those things I unconsciously believe. It's not that I believe them, but unconsciously I know they're absurd. But I'm also like, but what if lightning really does require an entrance and an exit?
Yes.
So I should respect lightning because it might just require that exact thing that
Yeah.
I disprove. So yeah.
Prove that it doesn't, exactly.
Yep.
Thank you.
Lower hand, press F6 to return.
All right, then Cindy's got her hand up next. Oh, we can't hear you, even though you're unmuted, which is weird.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but-
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you.
What is going on?
Sorry, there are two of us listening to your reading on different devices, so there's an echo.
Okay.
So I just want to congratulate you. We made sure that we didn't miss this. We were wondering where you were at the opening of the book lounge for Open Book. But we also knew that you had this reading, and we made sure because we didn't want to miss you at all. So I want to ask a question that's maybe a little bit of a challenge to what you said in your previous answer, because you said that you write, you were talking about the sort of wonderful surprises, the unexpected surprises of other authors celebrating and loving your work, rightfully so. And then you said that you primarily, write for yourself, which I don't know if, is that true for any poet that approaches a publisher with their work? And I mean, surely there's something that you wanted to share beyond yourself, otherwise you would have written a diary. And so, I'm interested in, what, who you approached, why you approached, and the sort of importance of being published as a writer, because there is an importance to it. And I understand your humility and modesty, but as it stands, you are one of the, most exciting up and coming published writers that has, hit the stage. And so just walk us through a little bit of that journey. I mean, many people in this room have already published many times over. Some are in the same boat as you and I, only one book out. But just why was it important for you to publish? And yeah, thanks.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to put my thoughts together. Okay. So when I was writing the collection, I was writing my master's. So the primary goal wasn't to publish it, although it was going to be published as part of a thesis. That the primary goal was just, I love poetry. I loved writing poetry. I love reading poetry. I love buying poetry books. That's like a favorite thing. If I go to a bookstore, I go to the poetry section. So I have this thing with poetry. But within that, when I read poetry, there isn't, not say there isn't a lot of representation of rural areas. Or if there is, rural areas and township areas always tend to be, the places where there's just poverty, like abject poverty. There's nothing beautiful about them. There's nothing mystical or, and so when I was writing my thesis, I think the focus was memory. And so a lot of the poems that I produced for my thesis were let me not say there were a lot about home, but a lot of them were influenced by my experiences of home. And by home, I do mean rural home, not these urban spaces that I've inhabited. So when I didn't approach a publisher, that's I guess the kind of different trajectory. Yes. Okay, so that's probably the only kind of very different thing about my route into publishing. I didn't approach a publisher. So I first met Nick when I read at McGregor. And we just met, I think that was in 2016 or 17. And he sort of threw out the idea of publishing me at some point. It was very like, okay, cool, that's great. You want to publish me? Great. And I didn't really take it seriously, or maybe as seriously as I should have. So I was like, right now I'm just focused on, getting my master's done and the rest. And so when eventually I finished my master's, I was so exhausted from just that master's journey. I did not want to do anything about it. And so he approached me again and he was like, now you're done with your master's, would you like to publish? And I thought about it and I was like, of course, why would I not want to pay homage to home, to rural areas everywhere? Not just because I feel like if a person has been to a rural area, there are poems in the book that they can connect with, that they can recognize themselves in, that they can, mirror experiences. And that's, I guess, the primary reason that I ended up going for publishing, because that actually required me to write more poems. And that there was a process of removing poems that were in the original manuscript that I sent to Shanga. So I guess, yeah, in a very condensed manner, that's kind of I don't know if I fully responded to your question, but yeah.
That was a fantastic question, Cindy. Thank you. I had that question and there you go. You asked it. And since we talk about Cindy, I'll just quickly briefly mention that we are also going to be at the open book tomorrow. Nondwe's at the open book tomorrow, sold out for her little micro event, I see. And we're there, the Red Wheelbarrow is there tomorrow afternoon, I think from 4 to 5. And Cindy's going to be reading for us, as well as another awesome poet from Hear My Voice. So, and there'll be an open mic there as well. So I'm going to put that info in the chat. Anyway, moving back to Nondwe, who's the star. Margaret has a question. Oh, we can't hear you either, but you are unmuted. That's weird. You're muted now. Try unmute yourself again. No. Still not.
Tell her about us. Margaret, there might be a setting issue.
you want to type it in the chat
I
for
had a
us?
setting issue.
Yeah.
The setting issue that I had, if maybe it helps, if you use the arrow on the mic setting and you the arrow up, if you click on MacBook Air mic or built-in, or if you change one of the settings, you might be audible. Just a suggestion. I'm not sure. I'm using a MacBook. I'm not sure what you're using.
Otherwise, I'll move on and then we'll come back to you, or you can type your question in the chat if you want, Margaret, if you're able to do that. Felelani?
Good evening. Am I clear?
Yes, yes, we can
Hello?
hear you. Yes, hi. Hi, Pilalani,
Oh,
we can
okay,
hear
thanks.
you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nondwe. Wow. I found what you shared this evening. That your pen dances into spaces that I'm very passionate about. I'm from a village. I'm still part of a village. um, so village people are very close people to me. Um, Specifically with the poem, the list of things, and other poem growing up. Such beautiful poems. But what also intrigued is the knowledge, which maybe I can say maybe the knowledge or about the village wisdom that seemed to come up into through your poems. And I know these types of conversations are not conversations that you can pick from a village tech shop or a village playground. You need to be in particular spaces and interacting with a certain age group, people that maybe I may call the wise ones, elders. So also these conversations don't come up anywhere. They are conversations that will come during traditional ceremonies, when people have had their feast and they're having their traditional beer and they're dancing, and then these conversations come up, these legends, this village mystica as well. So you seem to be interacting with those spaces, but not just being there um, physically, but you seem to be observing, archiving, listening carefully. So your poetry about village spaces portray clear that you are not actually writing from a tourist bus window or through a tourist bus window. These spaces are engraved into your system. Just your comment in terms of your connection with your people in the village, and to be able to actually extract such deep, dense village wisdom, that is pouring so much into your poetry as well. So just your comment on that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pilalani. I am honored and I am so happy that someone, when you feel mirrored in the poems that I've read, I feel like that was the goal, that is the goal. And the more I meet people who feel mirrored or who feel the experiences being mirrored in the poems, they make me like the happiest girl. So I am Umtanao Makulu, and in translation, that is, I am the grandmother's child. So I stayed with my grandparents. I grew up around my grandparents. My mom was at school, and I'd see her during school holidays, and that was the end of it. Or when she started working, I'd see her in December. So primarily, I grew up around old people, and so certain things would be the conversations of the day because the only people in the household were my grandparents. So for example, when it starts, when the thunder begins and there's lightning, my grandmother is one who has us cover everything that is mirror-like we have to cover. So we grow up having all these mini like beliefs that were in action around us, that at times then when we went to school, we started to question those. Like science tells us that lightning isn't just attracted by anything. So why is this village wisdom, you know, in this particular way? And so when I write about home, I think I not that I think, but I like to approach writing about the rural with a kind of tenderness, because I feel like there is a tenderness that is missing in how we look at Black rural spaces. And I think they do warrant that kind of tenderness and love and care, that in literature, they're not only places of poverty and places of loss, that they're also places of richness, places where things can be kind of discovered from those spaces. Yeah. Thank you, Pelela.
Beautiful. Thank you for that interaction. Margaret, do you think your stuff is still not working? You want to try again? No. Sorry. Otherwise, Ed's got his hand up.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey.
Hey, Nondwe. Hi.
Hey, Ed.
I loved your reading. I also grew up around older people, and that was a big thing for me in terms of my childhood upbringing, the way I related to the world. But yeah, your reading for me was incredibly nourishing and generous, even though I didn't grow up in a township sort of, or in a rural situation like you did. And I think what struck me as well was something that you alluded to earlier, and which Jacques' comment brought up with the poem about the witches. There's an incredible openness in your writing, which doesn't it leaves enough room for the reader to bring their story and to bring their context. It's a great strength of the writing. So really, Nondwe, just an appreciation, an observation, not anything, no question. Just thank you. That was lovely.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Ed.
Yeah.
Thank you for that one. Is there anyone else who has anything to add or ask or say around Nondwe and her reading? There's a comment in the chat saying that they love your poems and hope that they can also be translated at some point so that other people can appreciate them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Translation, I've thought about that, but I don't know how I feel about translation. Full translation. Have to wrap my head around that idea. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for listening. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for reading for us. And yeah, it's always so good to get to hear a little bit more behind the poems as well with the questions. So thank you for your answers there. Then I'm going to stop recording.